Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We're back on another episode of the Daily Recap. We've got a bunch of things to talk about, but today's first story, it's not going to be tariffs related. It's not going to be Trump related, even though there's plenty of things to talk about from that perspective. It's going to be Palantir related. We got to triple digits again on Palantir for the first time in about a month and a half. We have a new Google partnership with Palantir, so we're going to finally start off the Daily Recap without having to worry about Trump and his tariffs, even though we have a lot of headlines. Like when I mean a lot of headlines, I mean I today could not believe how many storylines were going back and forth. So we'll talk about Trump and the tariffs. We'll talk about Palantir and their new partnership today with Google, particularly Google Cloud in the public sector. And then we've got some other things to talk about in the context of Tesla. Pretty nice earnings. Broader market was one of the best days of 2025 until the middle of the day. Still a good day, was green, but didn't end up being as green as we were in the morning. And we'll talk about some macro data as well in terms of new home sales and the manufacturing ISM and PMI data. Thank you for being here. Let's get into it. All right, so let's start off with Palantir. Palantir, great day. It ended the day at about $100.50. At the height of the day, it was at $103.62. The last time we saw $100 on Palantir was not March. It was February, around that February 21st time. There was that big red candle the day that the Pentagon put out this headline that they're restructuring their DoD spend, which theoretically would have been good for Palantir because less money means more concentrated in the right areas, aka software that works. But it's been about a month and a half since we've seen $100 again, and today we broke through it. And we got those triple digits. Well, why did that happen? Obviously, yesterday, based on Trump doing the pivot from being super aggressive with J-Pow, saying that he's not going to fire him, and then doing the pivot on walking back the China 145% tariffs, which he kind of walked back on from the walk back that he walked back on yesterday. We'll talk about that in a bit. Those two things set up a good macro backdrop for Palantir and the rest of the market to do well. Even though the market gave up a decent chunk of its gains during the middle of the day, Palantir only went from 103 to 100, which I'll take it, given Palantir was at $90 on Monday. So still a nice gain in Palantir right now, triple digits. Now, the one partnership they got today, I think kind of put it over the edge in terms of being able to maintain its multiple and maintain its green in the midst of some of the red that we saw today. Palantir today has partnered with Google to bring FedStart to the Google public cloud. A reading from the press release. At Google Public Sector, we are committed to helping our customers execute their missions. Now we're expanding this commitment by adding support for Palantir's FedStart platform, so public sector customers can utilize software applications on Google Cloud's accredited infrastructure through the Palantir FedStart platform. What is Palantir FedStart? For those that don't know, Palantir FedStart helps U.S. government agencies achieve compliance, scale operations, and access innovative mission-critical solutions from leading independent software vendors, including many built natively on Google Cloud. TLDR, essentially FedStart, is a program that Palantir built to say, hey, you are a company that wants to sell into the government. We have a lot of experience working with the U.S. federal government. We can give you the accreditations. We can encompass the way that you sell into the U.S. government. We can give you the guardrails, the compliance, scaling the operations to actually be able to achieve the ability for you to even have a chance to sell into the U.S. government. And then Palantir makes a cut from the companies that are able to sell into the government. So it's an incredible product. They launched it about a year and a half ago. They have a bunch of partners. I think they have close to 15 to 20 different partners, different companies that are working with Palantir in that FedStart program. And this is a part of the business that I think is highly undervalued just from its growth potential, because there's hundreds of companies that want to sell to the USG, but they don't have the accreditations to get there. One of the things that most people know about Palantir, if you've been in the stock for a bit, is that Palantir is part of a handful of companies that has security level IL6 clearance. IL6 is the highest level of security clearance you can have when working with the US government. Palantir actually got this like 4 years ago, so it's not like they just got it. They've had IL6 for a long time. And that has allowed them to work with the hyperscalers like Microsoft, Amazon, Oracle, as per April 2024 when they launched that partnership. And today, with Google. So why is this partnership important? I have 4 pieces of analysis here. Number 1, it further establishes their presence in the US government. Number 2, it continues to show their ability to collaborate with hyperscalers like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. Number 3, again, FedStart is an incredible product to bring smaller companies into the government space. Now, a lot of those companies that are building natively on GCP, Google Cloud, can integrate with Palantir. Palantir being sort of the agnostic abstraction layer that companies can integrate with without having to necessarily take their entire platform off of a Google, Amazon, or Microsoft and work with Palantir. And then finally, because Palantir is one of a handful of companies that have IL level 6 security clearance in the USG, integrating with Google, in my opinion, only shows more trust and safety that they can bring to the government. Now, why does this matter? Well, we've got Doge. We have a whole new way of how governments are procuring software in terms of a new sort of paradigmatic approach. So the more trust, the more safety, and the most efficiency that you can bring to the federal government, I believe is going to be very valuable. And Palantir working with all the hyperscalers just kind of solidifies them in that spot. And I think today only underscores that announcement further and further. We do have Palantir earnings coming up on May 5th. I will do a deep dive in terms of the numbers I'm expecting on their earnings. I made a video back in January explaining how I think Palantir can get to 40% year-over-year growth. Do I think they'll get it in Q1? I have no clue. I think it would be pretty crazy, and I wouldn't be surprised if they got it because I do think there's a shot, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it's like 32 to 33%. Last quarter was 36%. I do think it's going to be a growth quarter. It's not going to be like the Nvidia growth quarter, even though it has a chance to be, but it's going to be a big growth quarter. And I think these deals and these partnerships are only establishing a bigger framework for Palantir to continue to grow. And as a result, the market continues to reward Palantir, getting back to triple digits on the day. All right, let's get into what happened with Trump today. We got a lot of different headlines to get through. Because he talks every day, he says something every day. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, says something every day. And you got a lot of conflicting headlines going back and forth, but I will try to synthesize and condense everything that happened today. Okay, so yesterday he took away the China tariffs, essentially, and said he wouldn't file POW. Cool, right? Markets were happy. 9:30, they opened up this morning. Everything was green, like blistering green. And so everything was cool. Then the headlines started coming through. So first headlines from Wall Street Journal. The White House is reportedly considering to meaningfully slash China tariffs. We knew that. Tariffs could operate in a tiered system with 35% on non-strategic goods and 100% on national security products. So think maybe 100% on like pharmaceuticals and 35% on t-shirts. I don't know why we need to do 35% on t-shirts, but nonetheless, like there would be some type of tiered system, not confirmed. That's just what the Wall Street Journal said. And then the Wall Street Journal also said Bessent and Lutnick convinced Trump to not fire Powell. Okay, cool. So we got some headlines, got some data. Maybe we have this tiered system. Good to go. Then Bessent, 20 minutes later, does a speech, and he says these four things. More than 100 countries have reached out to the United States for trade. So we got a number of 100 plus countries. Number two, he said a really good line, which I think a lot of people liked. America first does not mean America alone. So he's trying to say, hey, we're not trying to isolate everybody. We're just trying to watch out for our interests as well. And then he shitted on China for the next 30 minutes. He says China's current economic model is unsustainable and they are harming themselves and the entire world. And he says China can't just keep relying on the USA for demand. All of these points, very fair. I mean, yes, there are obviously a lot of issues with what China is doing in terms of the manipulation of their currency as well, which is not the best thing in the world. And he then gave some confirmation that, hey, a bunch of countries are reaching out to us on trade. Cool. So that's fine. That's dandy. Not that big of a deal. What gets the market to go down? Well, the White House comes out with a headline, and the White House ends up kind of denying the 145% tariffs that are going to be going away to an extent. So White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she comes out and says there will be no unilateral reduction in tariffs against China. The president has made it clear that China needs to make a deal with the United States of America. And that's when the market starts coming back down. A lot of the gains that we had started taking a little bit of a breather. Now, what does this mean? That there will be no unilateral reduction in tariffs against China? Essentially, the way I'm interpreting this is the press secretary is saying, hey, Trump's not just going to get rid of the 145% tariffs unless he gets something that he wants. And likely we're going to need some reciprocity when it comes to the reduction of tariffs from the other side. AKA, yes, we're going to get those 145% tariffs down, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. Then Trump goes and he does a press conference at 5 p.m. and he says explicitly when asked about the China tariffs, quote, I have not brought down the 145% tariffs yet on China. And the way he said it, if you were listening to it, it was kind of just like, what are you talking about? The tariffs are still there. I haven't brought them down. They're still 145%. So it's kind of like yesterday, bond market was screaming, stock market was not doing the best. And Trump says, hey, we're going to take down these Chinese tariffs. Stock market recovers. Bond yields were down today. They kind of ticked up towards the end. See the sentiment in terms of how he was talking. And it was like, what are you talking about? I haven't brought down the 145% tariffs. And it was kind of one of those things where the market just wanted like real confirmation that the tariffs are going down, but he didn't really give it by trying to kind of play this game that said, hey, no, like the tariffs are still in place. I'm not bringing it down. Now, the market didn't really tank on that statement after hours. And the reason I think futures didn't tank, futures are green right now, is because now at this point, the market doesn't believe anything. And when Trump says, I'm putting on tariffs, I'm not putting on tariffs, yada, yada, unless it's some unique statement that we haven't heard before, that's like something that could really catch you off guard. I think the market's like, you know what? There is no way in hell Trump's actually going to be able to impose 145% tariffs. Eventually it's going to go away. And I think the market's believing that we don't have the most leverage in the context of China, and eventually we're going to have to come to a deal. And so my conclusion from that is if we get more opportunities in the future where the volatility takes the market down, I think you buy the dip. I mean, I've been doing that all year. I know a lot of people that have been doing that all year. And it's like, if you're sort of a long-term investor, yes, buy the dip. That philosophy has worked out. But I think realistically at this point, Trump has shown a lot of his cards, and the cards are that he simply doesn't have the ability to impose these insane tariffs because it's not going to work. Xi Jinping did nothing for the past couple of weeks, and then Trump walked them back yesterday. And I guess today he's trying to sound like he's not necessarily walking them back, even though he is walking them back. And so the market should have tanked after hours today, 2%, because the market went up 2% after hours yesterday when he said he's walking back the tariffs, but they didn't, because I think the market believes at this point, look, the tariffs are going away eventually. We just have to be patient. And at this point, if the market uniquely reacts and we get a negative movement to the downside, I think you just buy that dip. On top of all of that volatility, Trump said a couple other things, and then we'll talk about the Bessent Elon story that was big today. Trump said, I haven't personally talked to Powell yet, but I might call him soon. I think it's time to lower rates. He then says, Elon is brilliant. He deserves to go back to Tesla whenever he likes, commenting on Elon's remarks from the earnings call yesterday for Tesla. And then he says, I love the Canadians, and Mark Carney is a nice guy, but it is costing us too much money to support them. So he then goes on to say that, hey, we can't keep sending Canada as much money as we're spending. And that's why the auto tariffs for 25% and the steel and aluminum tariffs that were rumored to be going away, the Financial Times reported that a couple hours ago, he kind of doubled down on those tariffs and said they're not going anywhere and that we're going to keep imposing those 25% auto tariffs on Canada. So all those statements, not the best statements, but it didn't crash the markets after hours. Throughout all of this during the day, you had another thing happen, which was that the Wall Street Journal reported and the White House confirmed that Scott Bessent and Elon Musk don't like each other. So Elon unfollowed Bessent last week, and the reasoning behind it was that Elon wanted one guy as the new IRS chair. Bessent wanted a different guy. Apparently, sources told the Wall Street Journal they started yelling at each other aggressively. Bessent said that to Elon, you promised all these savings in Doge and you haven't executed. And then Elon tells Bessent, you are a Soros agent, because obviously Scott Bessent has ties to George Soros. So both of these guys going at each other's souls right here. It was a loud, heated argument. The White House was asked about this argument. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt basically said, we have healthy disagreements in the White House, and we will transparently have these healthy disagreements. And then when she was asked, who did the president pick? She said, well, they're both here, aren't they? Implying the president hasn't picked anyone, even though the president did pick Bessent's choice for IRS, for the head of IRS over Elon. So he picked Bessent in this situation, but he didn't like kick Elon out or anything. So he still gets advice from both of them, which means they're both still part of his inner circle. But he ended up going with Bessent in terms of the IRS choice. So you've got all this drama going on in the White House. You've got all this volatility in terms of, are we walking back the tariffs? Are we not walking back the tariffs? And then you've got more and more headlines around auto tariffs, steel, and aluminum, this stuff that people think is going to start to go back down. It's not going anywhere. And Trump is, in fact, doubling down on the fact that we need to impose these tariffs even more. Still, the S&P ended up about 1.5% on the day. So look, it was a green day. We'll take any of these green days, but I think this market is the most headline-sensitive market I've seen ever. And I've been, realistically covering the markets for the past 5 years, took it really seriously for the past 3 years. I'm sure I will have many, many more markets to go through over the coming decades. But for those that have been following the markets for the past couple of decades, leave me a comment. Like, have you seen a market that has been this sensitive to every little syllable that the president utters in a press conference, in a briefing? He also did an impromptu press conference at 11 a.m. And that's also created a bunch of different quotes that got the market spinning in different directions. So look, the administration is definitely giving us a ton of media every single day, but a lot of conflicting narratives as well. I mean, even here's an example of a conflicting narrative. Bessent says 100 countries have reached out to us. Trump, in his second press conference of the day at 5 p.m., said that 90 countries reached out to us. Now, it might be a minute difference between 90 and 100, but in a world in which we don't have a trade deal yet and we really need one, those extra countries make a difference, right? And people start taking it seriously, and more so the perception of like, hey, how many countries are actually there? Like, how many, like, are you just making up these random numbers? Are these real? Are these fake? Or like, what's going on here? And so Look, I think you buy the dip. I think if we get more volatility, you buy the freaking dip. These are the best companies in the world. Eventually, I think AI technology, all this stuff is very real. It's not going anywhere. We'll have Google earnings tomorrow, and we'll get to see how Google is thinking about the future of AI as well. But if you get these opportunities where the market says, you know what, we don't believe anything and we want to go further down, then I think you take advantage of that. But I also think the market's getting to the point where they're like, this is getting stupid. This is like becoming a game, and we're not just going to sell off simply because of some headlines we see. Now, final update on Trump today, and this is not something I like seeing, but it is what it is. I can't really defend it. I don't think anyone can necessarily defend it, but Trump launched a program for the top 220 holders of the Trump meme coin, ticker symbol Trump. And if you are in the top 220 holders of the meme coin, you will be invited to a private dinner in Washington, D.C. on May 22nd. The meme coin was up 35% at around 2 p.m. Let me just check the price of it right now. It is now up 40%. At the height of it, it was up about 60% during the day. So one way to pump your own meme coin is to appoint Paul Atkins as the head of the SEC, who was sworn in yesterday, who is not going to investigate any of this, and to promise a dinner to 220 people if they have a significant amount of holdings in the Trump meme coin. So that is official. That's not fake. It was announced on the official Trump meme coin website. And so you had that to deal with throughout the entirety of the day, along with all the tariff volatility. It's happening. We're living through it. And we just got to be able to figure out how to manage the volatility and navigate it every single day. Okay, next quick update on Grab. I have a 6-figure position in this stock. I continue to believe that it is going to be one of those stocks that will outperform. It is in a 4-year consolidation. I think the consolidation eventually can turn into a breakout. Very simple headline right here. Grab just added Steve Tishman to its board of directors. Steve Tishman is a veteran investment banker specializing in mergers and acquisition. Why is this important? Well, Grab is trying to buy out one of their biggest competitors in Indonesia, GoTo. And if they do, they'll add $1.2 billion of revenue overnight and I think change the entire trajectory and narrative of their business. My Grab thesis is pretty extensive. I'll link it in the description on X if anyone wants to read it. But overall, free cash flow is exploding, 30% trades at cash, 44 million monthly active users. They're acquiring various companies. They just acquired another financial services company 2 weeks ago. They held their first ever product day in Southeast Asia. These companies really don't host product days like Robinhood or Palantir, but Grab did it. And they have a founder CEO. Their biggest issue is their margins, but that is a story that I think will inflect to the upside versus staying stagnant. I think for the past 4 years, it's been a really crappy story. I think that story is changing. And the company is profitable. So yeah, for those that are into Grab or for those that want to take a look at it, it seems like they are now getting serious about appointing people to their board of directors, which there's only 8 people on that board that can meaningfully re-architect entire businesses and help them merge with other companies. Maybe this is for GoTo. Maybe this is to architect the other financial services company they just acquired. But regardless, I think Grab is making some serious moves. And that was the update we got today for Grab. Okay, some macro data. So we had some pretty interesting macro data today that is important, I think, in the context of some of the stuff that people really cared about seeing. So services PMI, which is a way to understand the economy contracting or expanding from a services perspective. We also have manufacturing. Services PMI, the expectation was 51.3. Or sorry, the expectation was, let me get the exact one right here. The expectation was 52.5. We came in at 51.4. Miss, but not a bad miss. Manufacturing, the expectation was 49.1. We came in at 50.7. That's a beat. Global, which is the composite of those, the expectation was 51. We came in at 51.2. All that means in general is that we are expanding as an economy versus contracting. If you're below 50, you're contracting. If you're above 50, you're expanding. This is in the United States. Now, there are other PMI datas and ISM datas that show that we are contracting. So I think GDP growth in Q1 probably is going to be negative. The Atlanta Fed says that we're probably coming in at negative 2%. Maybe we come in at negative 2.4, negative 1.5. But we're going to be negative in this quarter. It's just not that aggressive to the downside, which again, if you're tracking, hey, are we going to get into a recession? We need to see some aggressive moves to the downside to be able to say we're definitely having a recession. Now, one thing that surprised me today, new home sales in the United States of America was the best in almost 10 months. The market was expecting 680,000 homes to be sold. We came in at 724,000, meaning there's more cash on the sidelines. Even with mortgage rates at 7%, people are willing to buy homes. And so what happens when rates come down, mortgage rates come down to maybe 5.5%, 6%. I think there's a lot of capital on the sidelines that wants to get into the housing market. The question is just, will we have the rates coming down to allow them to get there? And they'll probably refinance in the future, which is actually really good for SoFi, given they get a lot of demand from refinancing when rates do go lower. So in terms of that macro data, not amazing, not horrible, but that was most of the data we have today. All right, last thing I want to talk about is OpenAI. They came out with some crazy projections today. OpenAI now projects $125 billion in revenue in 2029, with $25 billion of that from new products that they have not yet announced. If they hit it, the current valuation is $300 billion. It's obviously going to be a steal. Google does $400 billion a year in revenue. They're worth $2 trillion. OpenAI just raised at $300 billion. Sam Altman has rumored that they have about 1 billion users, which is insane given that there's so many competing models, but people are choosing ChatGPT. And the company's projecting about $125 billion in revenue by 2029. Yeah, I think that's bullish for OpenAI, but I don't own OpenAI. What I own is Nvidia. I did a podcast with Steve last night. I'll link that in the description as well. We talked extensively about Nvidia. I am more and more convinced that Nvidia trading at 19 times earnings, take away 10% of their EPS, they start trading at 17 times earnings. Walmart trading at 31 times earnings, with most of their stuff coming from China, which is an issue. Nvidia, some of their revenue is from China, but the majority of it is from outside of China. The idea that Walmart is trading almost double what Nvidia is trading for not even a tenth of the growth is insanity. So I think the market is doubtful about AI CapEx spend, but then OpenAI is saying, wait a second, we're going to be doing hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue in the next 5 years. All of that is going to take more computational infrastructure, more reasoning models, more GPUs. Sam Altman literally tweeted today, hey, we're looking for more GPUs and we hope to get them soon enough to be able to handle all the demand. Like, where do we think the story is going? And I think eventually the market's going to wake up once the macro volatility is done, the tariff stuff is done, maybe we get back into a little bit more of a friendlier environment for the semiconductors. And I think these are opportunistic moments to be loading up on Nvidia. And that is what I'm currently doing right now. So not a bad update in the world of Nvidia. All right, that's it for me. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. Hopefully you all enjoy the daily recap. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm going to Canada, Toronto on Saturday. I'll leave the link in the description as well for anyone who wants to fill out that form to meet me there. And yeah, we have our own location on Saturday. It'll be super fun. And if you want to sign up, you can sign up on the form in the description and you'll get an email with all the details. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next one.